So, we've been working through these various practices, the first 28 sub practices of the first cycle of 7 gestures. A way to set the foundation for our path that includes our relative psychology, brings primacy to the incidents in our life as the teacher, the living liturgy, the letters and words of what happens in our life, which is really always our teacher. But here we're specifically acknowledging that, using somatic memory and the movement of the body to initiate experiences that elicit non-conceptual direct awareness of our nature in various facets and angles. The method is applied throughout the day whenever one remembers, on the spot, and formally in regular familiarization practice, like a kind of on the spot intervention with using the spell or the martial art or the magic of movement to remind not our head but our whole body and our heart as to the experiences we've cultivated while doing the practices formally. For those of you watching the video, welcome along. And also for those of us here, just noticing this moment is fresh. We've never been here before. We'll never be here again. And with that spirit, we can open the first gesture, feeling just this natural aliveness that is invisible in that it's not a color or shape. It has no location per se, but yet it pervades all of experience, and it allows all colors and all shapes to be seen. So it's invisible, and yet it illuminates and is aliveness, the subjective experience of being alive, which is perhaps the nature of reality, rather than that the outer things that we conceive of are so real. Rather, it's the awareness that can even come and name such things that is the most real. And then we practice the notion of impermanence. Every moment, vanishing act like waves dropping onto the sand, receding back into the ocean, and crashing on the sand. Every moment, that change of nowness is occurring. And it's poignant because we realize that it's not really whether or not time exists, but conditions are always changing. We can count on that. Is time passing? Some relative sense, sure. But more than that, conditions are changing and things are changing. What is time without change? And then we evoke the sacred mandala of our life, thinking about our journey, various memories that emerge on their own or that we conjure. Key moments of auspicious coincidence, and letting the glow of that, like our hands are a candle flame, radiating light of the beauty of our unique life, the pain, the joy, it's all inseparable. It's our journey. And feeling it, we feel our feelings right now, which is our current moment in the journey, always up to date. Tilting the hands forward, we think about why we're here. What is our inspiration, our commitment, our motivation for practice and study and Sangha? And then we dive into it when we're ready. Coming back up, refreshed, beyond hesitation. The morning, the first morning of reality, first dawn. It's always now. When we come into tenderness, safety, loving kindness, relaxing the head into the hand. You can't fake the physical gesture. It is a happening, it is kinetic, it affects us. We know when we're really letting go physically. And subjectively, we follow a sense of warmth and peace and gentleness. Drifting down to the heart, you could say dropping. The yogic practice of the long journey home. It's said that when we leave this physical body, that our energies and winds withdraw into the heart center. They rise from the genitals and drop from the head and meet in the heart, returning home to the source. And here is the land of empathy, shared perceptions, shared regard, altruistic heart, bigger identity of taking others' perspectives, questioning our own conclusions, staying open-hearted, truly open-hearted and open-minded. You know, to do that in all situations is never going to let us down. Doesn't mean we become naive or dumb. It's very brave and powerful, and it keeps our intelligence completely active. And then we move into the ultimate empathy of space itself, the height, width, and depth. Feeling our own spacious embodiment. Initially, we're learning how to feel the space between our two hands, between the top of our scalp and our bottom, even without our hands, between our shoulders and ribs, and between the front and back of our body. And we're learning how to layer those three things to feel this embodied, spacious reality body, not a mental body which is projected and imagined and half attended to. The mental body is flitting and spurious and discursive and flashes from here to there. This experience is more whole, right? It's not, we're not creating it, we're acknowledging it. the steadiness of our embodied subtle body and nervous system, feeling it through inclusion, not focus, through relaxation, not intensity, through surrender rather than non-distracted focus or attention. So we feel the spaciousness and it feels good. And then we acknowledge the energy within the body, emotions as sensations, thoughts in the larger space of the experience of the body. And what we're learning to do is feel the space around emotions and inside of emotions. That all of the sensations express space and all of space surrounds expression within and around. This gives us the opportunity to not follow our discursive stories about our experience, but to stay in the groundedness of awareness as it expresses itself as space of body. And now we enter the third sub-practice from the Mongolian shamanic tradition and the Tibetan cultural in general. There is a notion of tiger, lion, Garuda, dragon. Chinese culture has a similar 4 animals, but they're different in Taoism. In the Mongolian steppes, the tiger, lion, Garuda, dragon has been important for hundreds of years. Many people associate it with Shambhala teachings from Trungpa Rinpoche, but actually Mipam the Great was very fond of them, and from them, he passed away in around 1905, 1910, in the 1800s. And then also before him, for hundreds of years, in Kham, in Nyingma, Dzogchen communities, the notion of the tiger, lion, Garuda, dragon, and Lungta, and many of the themes of Shambhala, authentic presence, were prominent in those lineages. So it's been around for some time. And it even, you could say tiger, lion, Garuda, dragon goes beyond Buddhism into just the Mongolian shamanic tradition. The tiger is related to contentment. And the way we use it is the first stage, the first sub-practice of every gesture. And it indicates a quality of anything that is accessible, that people can engage with from the beginning of understanding a practice, that doesn't require any experience to get started. There are instructions. It might be, challenging in the way that learning any new thing might be, but it's there's an entry point to it. It's doable. The snow lion is related to the sense of joy and discipline, or discipline bringing joy. And this energy has to do with challenging ourselves. Once we learn this first sub-practice of the major gesture, we move into the ability to kind of take the practice further, apply it, you could say, apply what we've learned. So in the case of the 6th gesture, we took the initial instruction of height, width, and depth, which is very accessible, and we applied it to the emotions. The Garuda, which is kind of like a griffin in Western mythology, it's a bird, human flying bird that never lands. They're born hatched in space and they immediately start flying and they never land there. It's a kind of mythical creature, but they indicate a kind of outrageousness or fearlessness. And they are always considered in our practice trajectory, they symbolize the challenge point. where we test ourselves or go further with our practice based on what we've been disciplinedly applying in the initial instructions of the larger gesture. So tiger, lion, Garuda. The dragon level indicates mastery of that particular gesture and its teachings, and it has its own set of own practice to engage with, but it's based on having really gone through some level of training. Then again, they're all kind of also all in one moment. They're all kind of nonlinear. They're not entirely like just a successive thing, but that's one of the lenses through which we can look at these gestures. And it's kind of nice once you know that rhythm. The first gesture will be something sort of doable or an introduction. The second one will take that further. The third one will test or challenge that. And the fourth one will help us see what is mastery of that particular teaching and practice. So the third sub-practice has to do, if we say that it's about testing or it's about challenging ourselves, and sometimes it's called enhancement practice, which is a way of saying, sure, you can do this in meditation a little. Now what happens when you try to kind of take it to the next level? And it really is like a self-test, not a test that anyone else is evaluating you, but just your own way of seeing, ooh, this is where I might get stuck, or this is where I get really inspired. So that's good stuff. Yeah. And I'm, as you can tell this evening, I'm refreshing the view of the entire set of teachings that we're working on. And I'm doing that to kind of refresh and remind us that, wow, this is partaking in a bigger vision, and that our practice has really been considered and extracted and synthesized from all these magical teachings. And sometimes they say that the teacher's instructions are like the nectar of the deities, or the heart's blood of something, or the pith instructions, because they are the kindest, because they are the distillation of the teachings and practices into forms that are accessible, because the students and the teacher have a connection karmically or energetically. And so there's something special that can happen there. But if I don't properly sort of present the breadth and the vision of it and its context, sometimes for some of us, we just kind of think, oh, another practice. And it can kind of become blasé. And the problem with that is these are precious teachings that are so valuable, but it's easy in our modern world where information is in excess and access to information is never unprecedented. Never before have we had so much, yet never before have people been less content and more distractible. People are overscheduled. They're undercommitted because they're overextended. And then we find ourselves having a hard time, even though we really love and value the teachings, which is undoubted. Everyone I work with has said directly and personally and strongly, this is so important and powerful, and I'm loving it. Now, we know in our Sangha, people have various levels of ability to show up, availability to show up. But I'm just saying this also for all of us, because, we're heading into the last 50 odd days or so of our first cycle. And it's so important to, at least it's my job to try to, hey, it's precious, remember. Because you know what? when you think that way, guess what happens? It is. You're very powerful, you know. It's not coming from me. I have my experience, but you're the one that empowers you, and you have the power to make your practice come alive or not. So anyway, these are very traditional things I'm doing. I just want to say, I've seen many of my teachers do this, where they'll about to give a teaching, and then they go through the whole history of the teaching and the lineage, and you know where the how it was done and what people do. And it's like, what's all that about? Well, it was all ways of trying to induce your power in appreciating the teaching. Um, yeah, cool. All right. So I did my job. Now it's up to you. The easy part is to transmit the practice. So we'll start from the first sub-gesture, move our way in, and then we'll just move into the third. So to begin with, we have this incredible golden key of instruction that the top and the bottom of fingers on the body, and then feeling the space in between them. And suddenly we feel that expansiveness, height of our body, and the space in between, the width from rib to rib, arm to arm, however you like to. Feeling the space in between. It's indeterminate, isn't it? It's not like there's one point that's the space. There's all the possible points. Doesn't that get you to that feeling of kind of probability that they talk about in quantum? You know, that the super location, that particles are in every location and no location. Well, that's what's happening here when we feel spaciousness, the space between the 2 points. It's in all of the spots. You could put dots all along and move the dots, and space would be yep, 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 yep. It's in all of them. So you can feel that string of pearls, of space pearls, if you will. There, it's every point is space expressing space, unfolding into space, and then front to back. It's a feeling. You can feel your back, you can feel the front. They're not in the same spot, and you can kind of feel what's between them. Well, I'm not talking about the concepts or thoughts. I'm saying the experience. What's the feeling between them? There's a feeling of dimension, of distance, and yet it's indeterminate. You can't quite pin it down, right? It's spacey. Beautiful. Now we stack the height, keeping the height, adding width, height and width, adding the depth, height, width, and depth, all coming together. And I've liked using this word voluptuous, voluminous, dimensional. But the experience is one of all this beautiful three-dimensional space that is our spirit and being. It's different than the mental body, which, as I said, flits around and assumes. This one is stable. It's based on energetics of aliveness, and it's like water filling a cup. It's as if our awareness is liquid sunshine, like a viscous liquid that fills up the entire chalice of our body and pervades the entire experience at every point. It's very joyful. We call it blissful when we're embodied, right? It's beautiful. Now moving into the second sub-gesture, there's a notion of the energetics of emotion the way that we often feel emotions in the belly, the heart, throat, head. And here we're just sort of noticing, we're coming in, we learn this skill with the second sub practice of the third gesture, what am I feeling right now? Now we're doing, what am I feeling right now in this dimensional body? And we're starting to notice how there's sensations that have a place in space. Maybe it feels like our thoughts are coming up into our head and visual field and labeling objects or things, or maybe they can't quite pin them down, but it kind of feels like it's here, but then sometimes it's elsewhere and out there and here. But we're coming into this whole experience and we're not trying to stop any of that. With the emotions, we're also just trying to see, can we feel the space around them, which gives us a little distance and perspective and perhaps sense of humor. Can we also feel the space within them? That takes a little more practice sometimes, because sometimes we feel like they're opaque or they're obstructive or they're solid. But as we lighten up, we feel, no, actually the energetic field of emotion, it's not just one point. It's not just on the front. It's kind of pervading throughout the body, and we can really become familiar with that actual felt sense. It's not an imaginary thing we have to come up with. We can start to feel that emotions have a participation in the embodied nervous system and subtle body. Mm. We're also watching the interplay between thought and emotion, the way we think about emotions in the body, and create stories and often go up into our head and get locked out of the actual feelings. So here we're going to move into the third practice. Here we're going to continue with height, width, and depth. We're going to continue with the idea of thoughts and emotions being a part of our experience. Now I want to imagine, or I do, I also want you to. I would like to imagine that my body is like the sky. Would you like to as well? Okay. So you imagining, you imagine, I'm having a little trouble right now. You're imagining that your body disappears. What I mean is the shell, the physical body, all the sensations remain. But imagine, just pretend your body vanishes, but you still have all the sensation. You're feeling the zone of sensitivity of your nervous system, but it's like you have no skin, no bones, no organs. You're just a field of feeling, energy in space. We'll call this the sky body when you break the vase. And the sky, the broken vase is that there's space inside the vase. And when you break it, it mixes with the space around it. It was always connected, but it appeared they were separate. So here we're dissolving the solidity sense of the body and just having the sky body. Might feel a little weird, but you still have all your sensations. You could even feel your hairs and your skin and everything and organs, but it's all energy. We're just imagining, what if it's all just in the subjective experience? We can label the body real and physical, but what about opening to this sky body further? Now, we're still feeling the sensitive zone of our subtle body and our nervous system, and we still obviously are in whatever we're calling our physical body. That's not a problem. But what we're doing is we're saying, imagine it vanishes and becomes space. Just notice how that changes your subjective experience. That's all I'm asking. Now that's just putting out the red carpet, believe it or not. The real main event is when the celebrities arrive. And when the celebrities walk on the red carpet, who are the celebrities? They are any tension or tightening in the subtle body. We call this contraction as release. Whenever you notice a little nodding of energy in this space sky body, realize that it has nowhere to hold on to or nothing to cling to. It's just energy in space. Like wind in space, thoughts and emotions are free. When we don't regard our body as heavy, dense, and opaque, but we open to this playful imagination of the sky body, what happens to the emotional contractions in us? Their very occurrence becomes their own appearing reminder. Wherever there's a tension. So one of the practice sort of one of the sub aspects of this practice, you can roll your shoulder up and back, up and back. Roll your shoulders up and forward, up and forward. Drop your head, turn to the left, turn to the right. And move your arms kind of like waves. And these are all just symbolic reminders of the flowing quality of energy in space. Do you feel the wind on your fingers? Imagine your emotions are like that. They feel themselves like wind in trees, like wind on branches, like wind through fingers. Rolling, turning to the left, dropping the head, turning to the right, rolling the shoulders. And then moving from the hips around and back. You can do the horse lips or the bulldog. And then wiggle and shake. That's great. Khenpo Rinpoche used to say that sometimes when people were releasing karmic tendencies in their body mind, that they might have like a little income, like little, what is that called? Like muscle spasm, like, you know, when your muscles kind of like, blah, 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 blah. Or they might have a little twitch, little twizzle. So, we moved that energetics of our physical body to come back now to just feeling the subtle body. And if you want, you can do a gentle brush down, brush, pat down and brush down. Usually the patting's first, and then the brushing. You can even imagine that when you do the ah mantra of sighing, that your physical body just turns into sky. Ah. And you're all the way out, it's gone. You remember when you were a kid and you're like, what superpower could you have? I want to be invisible. Well, this is that. If you want to be invisible, just pretend. You're not taking it so seriously, but you disappear. But you still have the feelings and the energy. Like wind in space, or wind rustling the leaves through the trees. Ah. Now, the practice is simply resting in the sky body, height, width, and depth, but this sense of dissolved or disappeared into space. And yet there's all this energy, and you're just letting the energy kind of feel itself and flow like the wind and uncoil. Just sort of move wherever there's a tension and not. You just sort of remain with the sky body, and maybe it'll untie itself because there's nothing, it's not relating to anything. If you reach for yourself, it'd be like, you couldn't You wouldn't grab it. You're still here, but in such a light way. Just the energy. What about your legs and your contact points and all that? Well, that's just energy anyway. That's not, there's nothing about that experience that is anything other than energy. It's just a very rich, dense, vibratory energy. So we're not denying any of our normal experience. We're just saying, imagine you've become like the sky. You're made of sky. Now, what ought to happen is that when you lessen this sense of the physical body as a concept, the mental body that we're projecting as real and solid and imagining all the organs, which is not necessary, by the way, because that is a concept of the experience. The real experience is spacious. When we do this, when we relax in this way and imagine ourselves disappearing, but still feeling, we have all the sensitivity. It's our spirit that remains. And you could say our energetic, invisible life, aliveness is still here. And now the energy that normally knots up is knotting up in space all by itself. It's not relating to the so-called physical body so much. It's doing its own thing. And it's almost like taking away the background so the foreground becomes more clear. Or taking away the foreground so the background emerges. Either way, we're playing with perception and imagination here. But when we soften our sense of the body, the emotions become more able to kind of unravel themselves in space. Anytime there's a tension, just noticing it without having the so-called solid body, sometimes the energy just kind of relaxes and unties. It's my belief that all of our emotions want to feel free. They want to be felt, and then they want to complete their mission. Having been listened to and felt, they want to unravel back into space. When things get stuck or lodged or knotted, that's an issue of the subtle body, and it has a huge effect on our psychology. When we take away the idea of the body and have a sky body that disappeared into that kind of clearness, then the energy is revealed as more prominent. And even just being aware of it with the sense of spaciousness, sometimes the energy can just unravel. Sometimes it doesn't do that right away. It stays, but here's the trick. Remember the spaghetti westerns? It's that standoff, right, with the eyes, and I love those movies. And they're looking at their eyes, and then they look at the other person, and they're all waiting. They got their hands on the gun. It's so dramatic. And it's kind of like that here. We're in an enlightened standoff, which is that we're not trying to win. We don't have a gun. We're just not going to leave this spacious sky-like quality and try to solidify the emotion. And the emotion doesn't have to leave. It's a weird kind of I remember I think we're all old enough to remember War Games, the movie from the 80s. Do you remember it was about the nuclear thing, and Matthew Broderick was, I think it was him. Anyway, and it was a really good movie. Yeah, and then at the end, right? I mean, spoiler alert for our younger viewers. Pause and fast forward a minute if you want to watch it. But it's so cool because, the computer at NORAD is like simulating all the possible nuclear strikes to win against the Ruskies, the commies. And then finally, the computer goes, it simulates shooting all the missiles, and everyone's freaked out because it's thinking if it thinks it can win, it will shoot them. And it just goes ... and it goes, the only solution is not to play. Which was like, phew. Right. So, and of course, I've told this story before, pardon me, but His Holiness Rangjung Rigpe Dorje, the 16th Karmapa, when he came in the 70s to the United States at the invitation of Trungpa Rinpoche, they showed him a Pong. Remember when Pong was big? I think it was like 70, 77, that visit. It was like really in its heyday. And it was like, doo, 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 right? And you try to keep going to keep the ball going. And they put in the quarter, and he was ready, and he understood the game, but he just let the ball go. And they were like, "Oh, you got to move your thing." He's like, didn't say anything, and then he lets it, and then he like used up all his lives, and then he just looked at them and started giggling, and everyone got the message that the only solution is not to play. I mean, how long are you going to fight a computer? You will lose, right? So it was this funny thing where I think that's sort of at play here, which is if we can kind of just relax and imagine the dissolution of the physical heaviness of our body and just imagine it disappears into space, but we still have sensation, then the only solution is not to do anything, not to play, not to try to win, not to try to get rid of the emotions, but trust, can these energies see themselves now with less of a sense of something solid that they're clinging to or relating to? There's almost a sense of them kind of wondering existentially, like, why are we knotted up anyway? Was this your idea? No, I don't know. I mean, I always thought we were in a body and seemed so solid. So this is my version of the tantric logic of this. Now, before we go any further, it might be helpful for us to dialogue a little. Are there any questions, any comments, any insights about what I brought up so far? I'm not expecting that, by the way, at the Garuda level of practice, that suddenly you'll just get it the first time and be like, yeah, next. Although if you do, fantastic. But remember, these are organized in a successive learning pattern that bases experiences from the previous one on the next one. And it's all a map to help you explore when you want to. But if there are questions or insights or comments that would also be helpful to other people who will watch later. So, if you have anything to share, that'd be great.
I love that practice. I kind of minimized also my contact. So the way I'm sitting, the only things that are in touch with anything are my butt and my lower back.
Okay.
And so like I didn't want to have my arms touching the sides of the chair or anything. And my feet the soles of my feet are touching each other, but they're not touching any space. So that sky body was amazing. And I felt like a pain I'm experiencing in my body dissipated because it was so expansive in the sky. So, yeah, and I pictured the emotions like as clouds just going by, and I was like, oh yeah, there that goes. That was really, really, wow, empowering. Thanks.
Oh, Lori, that's wonderful. I'm so glad. Yes, you're welcome. Yeah, I love that image. Like there are clouds in the sky, you're a sky body, and they can kind of do what they want. You're like, oh, you're going over there. Cool. I'll be everywhere. Yeah, neat. What else? What did you notice using your imagination in this way?
It kind of felt like maybe what it might feel like, when we leave our bodies at death.
Mm. Hmm. That's amazing. Yes. Right. The subtle body is what leaves the physical body. And they say that it's this incredible experience of lightness, of being. What was that? Wasn't there a great a movie or a book or a novel, The Unbearable Lightness of Being or something? I still don't, I've always loved the title. I still forget what the movie's about or the book. I think it's supposed to be quite good. But anyway, I I know that title is beautiful, right? Like it's like, oh my gosh, that there's also some weird thing. I don't know. Have you heard about this where they talk about something like 14 grams or something? When people die, the body gets 14 grams
Mm.
lighter or something. Yeah, there's some weird, it's fascinating. But people talk about, I don't know, they wonder. But just imagine if you weighed in a light body 14 grams. It would be pretty light, no gravity.
It kind of reminded me too, Nick, of what you had shown me when you're looking back, when you're thinking of maybe the Buddha or a teacher, and you're looking back, you become,
Yes.
and what's there
Yes.
behind the eyes.
Yes. This spacious, and sometimes we've called it the living space. Tuku Ujin used to call it sunlit space. A beautiful thing, our nature.
Can you go into that, Nick? What does that mean?
Well, when we rest in our awareness and we're not, following the thoughts about it per se, right? We're just experiencing it. He said that had a spacious quality, and yet he said it's like space but like sunlit, empty space. So he was describing the experience of pure awareness, when we're not lost in thoughts or when we're not, fixated, but when we're just open and in that openness. And he was describing our, fundamental nature in what we discover in meditation. Isn't that a beautiful phrase? Yeah, I love it. I love poetry because, of course, he's being poetic about it, but it's also quite, almost, it's very almost literal. Like, that experience of being aware is light that you can't quite, and a spaciousness that you can't quite. And so it's, these things are subtle in a way, but then the big joke is it's the very basis of everything we experience. Talk about the fish in water, and sometimes we just get so caught up with all the beauty of the reef and all the other fishes that we forget we're in the water. And, it's the same thing here. It's like that clear, the way light goes down into water, and does those beautiful patterns. Kind of reminds me of that too, like it's so easy to get all into the objects and forget the context of our awareness. Yeah.
I think the Garuda level for me here this time around is knowing the moments where I actually feel safe enough to do the practice, and just my circumstances right now are such that I don't. So just honoring that. But I was having kind of glimpses of the first time you transmitted this gesture to me, and being at the beach the next day and looking in the water and seeing what you were just describing and going, right, that. And I actually took a picture of it to remind myself.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. I think that's so beautiful. That depth, you know, when you look into the clear water, right? It has all that depth and light going through it. And you see how it's satisfying. It's like a jewel. Why do you think we love diamonds and rubies? You know, because they have that depth and light. They remind us of our true nature. Right now, as you're looking at the Zoom screen, there's all the space in between you and the screen, behind it, inside of you, behind you, around you, inside the person you're looking at, behind them. It's this luminous sea of space. And when we can tune into that level, it's blissful or enjoyable. It's the natural joy of our true nature. And it's you know, what I don't know, is it, I can't remember what, there's a slogan for some state, the way life ought to be. I can't remember. Maine is vacation land, but I feel like maybe they had that one on their plates too, the way life ought. I can't remember. I think it might be, but anyway, I've seen it, you know, this little slogan, but it's kind of like when we do feel safe enough in our nervous system to drop away from the I'm gonna close the door. Hey, sweetie. Sweetie's dropping off groceries and but when we do feel kind of relaxed, you know, and you mentioned the beach, Jan, is a great place for relaxing, right? And the warmth of the sun and you know, whether, or if it's in the forest, right? Or you're taking a walk, that would be a great place to do this as well, right? But it is a wonderful experience to use our imaginations, you know, knowing that we're I love this, by the way. This is like one of my little adorations of this kind of Dharma that we're doing, these kinds of practices, is that the imagination I'm requesting of you to try is akin to a natural quality in your perception. In other words, I'm not asking you to suddenly become like an alien creature who, you know, experiences things totally different than you. I'm saying, no, just do this thing that unlocks a certain part of how you already are. And I love that, right? It's the imagination gets so close to our nature that it's like, wait, this isn't even, I'm not even imagining, am I? This is also true, that I don't really have such a solid thing. I can think that way, I can assume that, but in experience, it's not really like that. It's all energy in space. Wow. So I love that kind of stuff. That's like, you know, for me, that's like the nerdy aesthetic of, ooh, that's just so beautiful. I think it's beautiful. Any other, before we wrap up, any other questions, comments, insights about this practice, challenges to it, you know, anything? Just it's always neat to hear whatever is being evoked. And of course, we'll have the whole week to practice it more and kind of
Nick, when you're triggered with an emotion, and like maybe you're in a conversation with somebody on the phone or something.
Yeah.
And I remember you saying from the other retreat or session that, it's best at that point just to know that you need some space.
Yes.
But is there a way to access this type of spaciousness on the spot? I guess it's sort of what Janet was referring to too. Is there a way to feel safe enough on the spot? What's the trick to that, or gateway, or are you just saying it's just a matter of practicing, feeling the spaciousness enough so that it becomes more and more just a natural state, even if you're triggered? You know what it seems like? It seems like if I do get triggered and somebody said something to me that makes me triggered,
Yeah.
it's almost like I can just sit there and not say anything and be kind of okay. But if that person's kind of prying, then it seems like as soon as I say something, that it's just, it falls apart.
Right. It's a really interesting point. It's like when I mean, and I'm fascinated by this. Like, is it possible to induce safety on the spot? I guess the answer is it is if it is, and it isn't when it isn't. It's not an external thing, right? It's not like something that floats there and one can grab it. It's based on how are you feeling inside. And we all know that our state of mind can shift from moment to moment. It is possible, but what would bring that about? And what one of the challenges is, if we're trying to escape feeling unsafe or triggered through using a spiritual technique, that's what we call spiritual bypassing, right? Because we're trying to get away from the feeling using something to get rid of it. It's fundamentally aggressive because we're actually regarding the feeling as a problem. We're saying, yeah, this has to go away now. The feeling isn't actually the problem. However, sometimes we're holding on to the feeling and we don't need to. And it's hard to discern the difference. Sometimes the feeling is I would consider it kind of like again, we'll go back to the notion of a nebula. Sometimes there's a collapse of the star and it explodes, a supernova. And at that time, I mean, really, it's like going in a spaceship and saying, can the spaceship withstand the supernova? It's like, probably not. I mean, a lot of people might have tried and they're gone. All the spaceships just got annihilated. It's too much energy. It's too powerful. You need to just ride it out. But is it theoretically possible? Yes, maybe. But again, where is that going? Because now it's starting to get kind of like esoteric in philosophical. It's almost like, generally speaking, when we're overloaded, we have to respect the supernova. Now, when the supernova disperses and turns into a nebula, a cloud of light and energy that's not so explosive, sometimes there we're holding on to the supernova experience because it gives us ground. And so unfortunately, no one is safe from the logic of Dharma. People who are saying, whenever I'm triggered, I can't do anything, that's an extreme. Or it's an extreme to say, when I'm triggered, I can always conquer it. That's an extreme. That's not true. The middle way is, how do I know what's appropriate in a given situation, right? And that requires sensitivity. In fact, all states are already in the sky body. Now, how do we know that? Well, we don't know it when our energy is so overloaded in our system that we are in threat. We might know that there's a sky body, But there's so much density of energy that if we try to disperse it because we want it to go away, again, aggression. If we hold on to it because we want to have a problem because we're afraid of the spaciousness and the groundlessness, well, then we have a problem. And so what is the middle way between the two? I would say if there's complete and total acceptance of what you're feeling on the spot, total, complete acceptance, no desire whatsoever to hold on to it or to repress it. Yes, it's possible in that moment for it to self-liberate. It's possible. But I think this is sort of, again, kind of theoretical. What I usually think is important, and why I brought up Trungpa Rinpoche this morning, even a Mahasiddha like Trungpa Rinpoche taking a break because he got upset and he went away. Even he said, you know what? I'm not going to do this on the spot because there's too much energy here. So I talked about the seasons. And I think I ended this morning session with, you don't plant crops in the winter. And I think there's a humility to that, which is like there's an order to nature and to our own energetic system. Do you understand, Stephen? You're not a person. You're a supernova. You don't get to fucking negotiate with a supernova. Do you understand me? You're still thinking you're a person. You're not a person. You're a universal force of nature. And so if you're going to work with that force directly and honestly, then you can work with it, and all sorts of shit might or might not happen. But if you're still regarding it as like, I can do this, nah, no, you can't. Not even Trungpa Rinpoche could do that. If he couldn't do it, none of us can do it. So the point is he was actually practicing perfectly in that moment. He said, oh shit, this is a supernova. I'm going with the waves of it, and I'm going to take some space, which, by the way, is perfect practice. It's not better practice that he stays there and conquers it and shows everyone. Because believe me, this is what I used to think when I was younger in my path. I would come to an obstacle and I would think, for me to be a real practitioner, I must overcome this obstacle right now to prove that I have attained the realization. And guess what happens there? It's so humbling. I kept learning over and over and over that if you think there's something for you to do, you've already stepped out of the profound view. If you think you're a person practicing, that's dualistic. So you have to come back to this non-dual approach, which is, oh shit, everything is exactly the way it is and there's nothing wrong with it. And that's what I meant. If you can really feel that, then you might be able to, ironically, in some situations, ride right through it in the middle of the storm on the spot. Yes, maybe. But it has to come from this space of not even regarding there to be any goal. If you have any sense of something other than what's happening being what you want, then you've already lost it. Do you see how that works? So the nodding in space, if you look at the sky body, the nodding in space is like thinking there's something to do with that. Remember, the instruction is the only solution is not to play. So the instruction is, oh shit, everything's perfect the way it is, always. So I would challenge you and flip it and say, can you see that all experiences are already your true nature? Rather than, can I change the relative aspect of this to the spacious version? Because there is a discriminating wisdom awareness that knows the difference between being overloaded by heavy, luminous, intense, emotions that are like they're too crazy and we feel scared, and feeling like really peaceful and relaxed. Like, we can discern the difference. That's called Paiyu in Tibet, the discernment between two states. And it's not concepts, they're energetic, right? You can tell the difference between red and green without a concept, right? You can just see it. You discern without, you don't have to label them. You don't have to know any language. And they know this from, even animals can do that, right? We don't, so it's not like a mystery. We can discern energies But can we become, and here's another way. Okay, how about this? This is, all right, this is putting it in another way. How about becoming one with the emotion? How about becoming one with the experience? Is another way of saying that.
Would that be like dropping into the heart and feeling it?
Yes.
And then maybe saying to the person that, you know, this is making me feel the such and such.
Yes. Yes. Even saying, oh my gosh, I'm overloaded right now. I want to bring up the story of that I've told you hundreds of times. I'm sorry, but I just love it so much. And it's so important. It's the story of the 16th Karmapa, Rangsheng Rigpe Dorje, going to the roof of a skyscraper in Hong Kong for the first time. Can you imagine being born in the Bronze Age Tibet? And then they take you to a city. That must have been weird. So they took him up to, you know, this tall skyscraper, and he looks down and he sees all the people like ants. You know that experience when you first go up in a building, you see that people are like, and he looks, and his two attendants are with him. And you know, this is a very powerful visionary spiritual being. I mean, people who went to his Black Crown ceremony all had psychedelic experiences. I mean, he was very powerful, very, 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 very powerful being. He goes up, he looks at all these beings, and he goes, oh my God, they don't even have an Om Mani Padme Hum. They don't even have the simple practice for their minds, all these millions of beings. He falls to his knees. Falls, uncontrollably weeping. Unbearable suffering, compassion. He drops to his knee. He can't stand. This is one of the most powerful beings. You know, Trungpa Rinpoche talked about him as a father figure, as someone he looked up to, and many people felt he was, you know, he's completely realized being. He drops to his knees. He can't support his own body. He's feeling so much unbearable compassion for these millions of beings he's just seen. His attendants are holding him up. He collapsed. That's power. That's true power. He became one with what he felt. So much so that he lost control. It was too much, even for him. When he was dying, he had terrible bed sores. He was in Chicago in a hospital in 81. And they were terrible, terrible. Some people even, you know, people project a lot of deification onto great teachers. And sometimes I'm like, you don't need to do that. They're already beautiful, just being human. You know, cut it out. But they thought, oh, he's sucking in all the cancer from everyone else around him. I'm like, you know, well, maybe. He certainly wouldn't be impossible, but he definitely had that kind of compassion. And he was wincing when the nurse moved him. And then she starts crying. And he's in terrible pain. And he just looks over to her crying, and he's like, sweetie, what's the matter? You know, like instantly focused on her completely. Like, and she would, and like suddenly he's fine. And His Holiness has talked about this too, the power of compassion. That he had a terrible rupture, I think, in his stomach or appendix, and he was terrible pain. And, you know, in India, they drove His Holiness the Dalai Lama like 8 hours to a hospital because you're in the middle of nowhere, and you're going over these bumps. And so every time it was like a searing pain, like you can't imagine going through his body on, you know, it was constant and they said they were just so worried about him. And then he saw this one man on the side of the road who had polio, a preventable disease, who had crutches, you know, and could barely, you know, walk. And he looked at him, and he said in that moment, all of his pain vanished. And he just was like, oh my God, look at that poor man. I wish I could trade places with him. Probably the guy would be like, no, it's cool. I don't want to be in your position. You're in more pain than I am. But my point is, the point is clear, right? That we are part of everything. Every energy is the true nature manifesting. The sky has experienced unbelievable weather throughout. What thunderstorms, what hurricanes, what unbelievable power has gone through it, and yet it's never changed. It's never been harmed. There is a part of us that has never, ever, ever, and never can be harmed. That is true. That is true. But it's not different from any weather that happens in it. Isn't that amazing? So that means even when we're terrified, we can experience the space and still be terrified. It's not that the terror just goes away and then, see, now you're spacious. No, space is through the terror and back. It's possible to get to that level. And weirdly, so why then the sky body? Nick, if everything's already the sky body, why practice the sky body thing where you imagine you disappear and there's all this space and it feels great? Well, because it actually lets us get in touch with what's really there. There's also another problem we have. We tend to reify the existence of our body above and beyond its real condition. We tend to make it more solid than it is. We tend to hold on to it and clench it. You know when we clench your body when you're stressed? Of course, we're tightening up. And when we've done that for years and decades, it becomes natural to us. And if someone says, stop doing that, we're like, no. That is also a problem. That is a problem of holding on to our ground. And so we have to learn how to let go of what we hold on to. Even if it feels secure, it's not real security. Real security is the indestructible sky-like nature. However, we imagine the disappeared body to feel, oh my God, it's already here. That's the joke, right? The body's still here, but once we imagine it disappears, we feel, oh my gosh, there's all this space. Exactly, it's real. You're not experiencing something fake. However, if you're overloaded with a lot of energy and you try to do that for any reason other than like just total relaxation and non-agenda or love, then it starts to get aggressive and the very medicine becomes poison. As Nagarjuna said, those who believe in emptiness are incorrigible because they've taken the medicine and turned it into poison. They're trying to possess this indestructibleness and use it to get rid of their feelings. Well, that's not going to work either, right? So these are why we talk about the two extremes of exaggeration and denial. Fixation and rationalization. And in the middle way is realizing, oh my gosh, the space is already here. Now, the more we realize that, we can, if we don't resist the emotion at all, if we become one with it, yes, we can feel the space in it at any time. But in order to not resist it at all, it gets really weird. It's almost like, well, then it doesn't matter if it's there or not. Do you see what I mean? So it's not about it not being there. I hope I'm not like over hammering this nail into the wood. I'm just trying to. Is that helpful? Yeah.
Yes, very helpful. Thank you, Nick.
Okay.
Really appreciate you going through all that. I appreciate it.
Well, I love you and I love this exploration. And it's really cool, right? To think about. And one of the things I just want to say also about Trungpa Rinpoche that was so neat is that he could feel all of his emotions, jealousy, passion, anger. I have tons of stories of all this happening, from secondhand, people that were there, like literally 1 degree of separation, people who were right there in the room with him at the time, who I trust. I have a number of these stories and they're fascinating because another thing that Trungpa said is, no one has ever removed the emotional response system and remained a functional human being. So that's what's so funny about it, is it's like, you hear some of these earlier teachings on like, oh, suppressing the kleshas, or kind of, removing the conflicting emotions. But those are all about shamatha. Those are states of concentration. They're not profound realization. The vipassana or insight states, you reintroduce the emotions. And this is why Milarepa said, leave the calm pool of shamatha and enter the stormy ocean of vipassana. Because his point was, yes, you can get very peaceful in a concentrated state, but then you want to be able to go into the chaos. And what is it we're looking for? And you're right, Stephen, with what you're saying, because Longchenpa said it very clearly, the imperturbable rest. The imperturbable rest is the spaciousness within every experience at all times. That just turns out the way to get there is, you can't do it, you can't practice it, you can't make it happen. You have to kind of become one with what's already in you. So here we imagine the sky body, the spaciousness, we dissolve the body, we get familiar with that feeling. And then, believe it or not, over time, when things get more dense, you can remember the sky-like feeling and go, wait, this denseness is a big storm. Have you ever remember when you're like in the summer and there's a beautiful heavy lightning thunderstorm and the rain's isn't that the best?
Mm-hmm.
And it's an expression of space. It's space going wrathful dancing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it is possible to appreciate every state of mind. It just turns out, in order to do that, we can't have any preconception about what our experience should be like. The spaciousness isn't a memory, it's an experience that is always here when we relax into it. And it pervades every experience. The entryway into it is this non-doing, this non-resisting, because it's already so. The joke is you can't make it because it's already there, right? It's kind of like when I talk about awareness. Ready? On 3, become aware. 1, 2, 3. Right? You couldn't do it, could you? Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. You can't do this either. But we can practice. This is what's so neat about the sky body. We can practice disappearing by feeling the spaciousness and then going, wait, actually, that's true. That's not me. I thought I was imagining a disappearing act, but then you discover something that's always there. Sneaky. Anyway. Thank you, Stephen. That was fun to explore that. Any other thoughts before we close? Janet, what was the Ani Pema quote that you brought up when I was talking about this the first time? The sky body. Do you remember the?
You are the sky, everything else is just the weather.
Ah, that's it. Thank you, sweetie.
You
Yeah.
repeat? I didn't hear that.
You are the sky, everything else is just the weather.
Oh, nice.
Beautiful, right? May all beings realize they are the sky and everything else is the weather. May all beings realize true compassion where they feel one with everything. Emaho. Love you guys. Have a good night. See you soon.